So we'll move on to you, Rosemarie. Rosemarie Garland-Thomson from Emory University, and the title of Rosemarie's paper is Rough Natality. So over to you, Rosemarie.
Thank you. Going to set my timer. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here and to be included in this really generative and capacious program. I'm sorry I've not been able to participate more fully. I'm coming to you from California. So there's always a timing challenge in this, as well as a geographical challenge. My name is Rosemarie Garland-Thomson. I'm going to introduce myself to you. I'm a professor emerita now of literary studies and cultural studies, and more recently, bioethics. So my home institution is Emory University, but because I have taken emerita status in order to live in California, which is where I'm joining you from, I'm not at my university anymore, but most of the work I've been doing recently is in the area of bioethics and also in a field I've contributed to, which we sometimes call disability studies or cultural disability studies, or more recently, disability bioethics. So this is the framework that I'm presenting my work, this recent work, which is in progress, and I'll tell you more about that. But it's important to know the analytical tools and the disciplinary perspectives that I bring to this work on natality, what I'm calling right now this project of rough natality that I'm going to be showing you. So this is part of some presentations and some publications that I've been doing, which bring out or try to call out and analyze what I'm calling a literature of welcome. That would be an imagistic iconography, if you will, drawn primarily from the Christian tradition, the rich Christian tradition and narrative tradition, imagistic narrative tradition, to find a ethics, as I said, of welcome for promoting natality and the acceptance not of only new life, but particularly new life that is given the label and the diagnosis of disability in the broadest sense. So that's the background of what I want to present to you today, and to emphasize again that this is work in progress. So I'll be sharing some of these images in hopes of getting some conversation from you. So let me go now to my next slide. Okay, I'm trying to move this forward, which should happen if I simply am able to touch the enter button. Is that right?
Yeah, you may want to try first clicking on the slides with the mouse, just once, and then if you've done that, yeah, you go.
Thank you. It's a
Now
very
it should
busy
work.
screen up here. I would encourage everyone to turn on captions in order to have multiple modes of audience participation in these presentations. So I'm going to start with some of the work that I have already done. I published a little and presented a lot on what I call sacred choreographies. By this, what I mean is representations, in this case, sculptural representations, that are part of a long tradition of public art. That is to say, art, in this case, sculpture, that is readily available to the public in public spaces. And so I'll begin with this work I've done on the figure, or what I call the sacred choreography of the Pietà. And so I'm showing on the left here the quite well-known Pietà of Michelangelo, which of course can be seen in the Vatican in Rome. And there are many, many iterations, of course, of this choreography, this entanglement of bodies, if you will, in cultural representation. This particular version of the Pietà, but all Pietàs, show the mother, who in the Christian tradition, of course, is the Mother Mary, embracing in various ways, various choreographies. You can look up Pietà and you can see many, many of these. I often show some, but I didn't have take the time today to show us many others. But we have the Pietà here of Michelangelo, which is a carving, of course, in marble. And we have the crucified, or the dying or dead Jesus, who is the son of Mary, of course, who is draped across the lap of the mother here. And I want to suggest that these sacred choreographies, as I'm calling them, are part of a tradition of representation, sacred representation, in the public consciousness. So they're known enough to generate versions of other sculptures that rely on the reference to the original sculpture or the original work of art. And I'm showing here a much more recent work. I think it's from 2007, which is 2009, I'm sorry, which is a sculpture called An Everyman Pietà by the Australian artist Sam Jinks. That's Jinks. And we have a recognizable reference to the previous, or to the source image, the source choreography or sacred choreography, that is recognizable because of the what I call bodily choreography that's the same. So we have a change, the major change, of course, between the Sam Jinks Pietà and the Michelangelo Pietà is that the figure holding the dying or dead body is not the mother of Jesus, Mary, but rather it is an everyman dressed in a 21st century or 20th century costume. And it is, of course, a man here, not a woman, and holding on his lap in the same choreography, in the same position, to achieve the illusion here, he is holding an older person, perhaps a parent, perhaps an older figure, perhaps an ancestor. And we're not even able to identify the gender of this figure on the lap of the everyman figure here in Jinks's Pietà. But there is a message here. There is a contemplation of care, a contemplation of the bioethics, maybe we want to say, of aging, of care, of what we owe one another. It's a generative choreography. It's a generative work of art that refers to a well-known other piece of art and takes the meaning of that art into a different time and a different conversation. And it's this work which I want to call the literature of welcome. And it involves, I want to suggest, allusions to natality, to birth and its corresponding concept, and that is mortality. Now, much, of course, of the literature of welcome, or the literature of the West, concerns itself with mortality. But I want to suggest that the generative potential of natality as a concept developed primarily through Hannah Arendt and I'll talk a little bit more about that, gives us an opportunity to think about the meanings of natality, of birth, that might offset or at least create a complementary conversation about birth instead of a conversation about death. In other words, to think about natality in the way that Hannah Arendt has given it to us, that is to say, the capacity to begin anew, instead of mortality, which is one of the primary themes of much of Western art, especially sacred Christian art, that is part of the cultural consciousness of Western culture because of its long tradition. So I'm going to share some other images. Let me see. This is one Pietà, just to show you. I'll describe it a little bit. It's part of this long tradition. We have again here Mary the Mother in a slightly different relationship of embrace from the Michelangelo Pietà, but still this is one of the many, many Pietàs that you can find in the entire Western tradition. I wanted to simply show that to you. A more recent Pietà, and I've done some of this work already, comes from 2018. It's Tylon Sawyer's Pietà, which takes, again, this choreography of embrace that is quite recognizable and redoes it to do another message, another choreography with a whole new set of meanings. So what we have here is a woman recognizably of African American descent with the American flag behind her, holding on her lap a boy who is dressed, costumed is what I like to say, in the traditional hoodie costume of young African American youth in America. And the mother here, the maternal figure, is not just an African American, but she's also draped in a kind of figure, a costume, which is a reference to the costume of Liberty, the Statue of Liberty in the American context. So this is, again, just one example of how this choreography of what I want to think of as natality, that is to say, someone who has been given life and given birth by the figure that we have embracing this other figure on her lap. And we have, again, a message that is created by the inflections and the allusions here to these, what I would want to call sacred choreographies of natality. Another image, just briefly, this is Marilyn Mark's photograph of a woman who is holding a young child with a significant disability in a rehabilitation pool. And this, of course, gives us the familiar choreography of the mother or the female figure holding the child on her in an embrace across her lap, but it is put in another context here, which I think is quite interesting, and that is the context of a pool of water, which brings in familiar representations, of course, of these sacred scenes of baptism, which are very common in the iconography of the Christian traditions of ritual and sacred choreographies and representations. This is another image that I like to show that's part of this choreography of what might be called embrace, or the choreography of welcome here. This is a different kind of scene. What we have here is the artist, Judith Scott, who is a woman born in the 20th century. She was a woman born with autism and Down syndrome, and she began rapping at a sheltered workshop in California. by taking fiber and wrapping it around various items. And she continued to do this art, and her art is very well recognized. It's part of the tradition of what we think of as folk art, outsider art, self-taught artists. That's an important folk tradition worldwide, but certainly in the United States. And this is, I think, quite a beautiful choreography of embrace. It's a black and white photograph showing Judith Scott embracing one of the wrapped sculptures that she herself has created. So she is, in this sense, embracing the creation that is not the child of her body, but rather the sculptor that she has created with her own hands and body. So this is Judith Scott and her sculpture. And I want to focus on a sculpture that I discovered recently at the Smithsonian American Art Museum in Washington, D.C. And this is the sculpture that is part of this tradition of embrace, this tradition that I want to call the iconography of welcome, or the iconography of natality. I want to use all of these phrases to think about the cultural and ethical work that this kind of art can do, this kind of public art, and this is very important. So this is a sculpture made of wood. As I said, it's in the Smithsonian American Art Museum. It's called Birthing. It's done by an artist named Bessie Harvey. We have very little information about Bessie Harvey, except that she comes from the American South and that she has done this work in 1986. I have not done research with the curators at the Smithsonian American Art Museum, although I hope to do that on a research trip to Washington, D.C. As I said, I'm just beginning to take a look at this. But what I'm quite taken by is the choreography of embrace here, which is something of a stretch, if you will. And I'll describe this figure. It's made out of wood with feathers on the top of the figure. And there is a narrative that goes along with this. Bessie Harvey was the mother of 11 children. I don't have the wall text here with this, but I'll repeat a little bit about it. She was a mother of 11 children, and she wanted to do sculpture. She wanted to do artwork, but because she had a full-time job and 11 children to care for, she didn't get a chance to do this until all of these children were in school. So this is one of several pieces that have been collected at the Smithsonian American Art Museum. I'll describe it a little bit more. It's done from wood, and the wood is very rough. That's one reason I want to call this rough natality. I want to talk about what rough might mean in terms of both the description of the material here, that it's made from rough materials, that is unhoned kind of wood, but also rough in the sense of its unfinished quality, and rough in the sense of the psycho-emotional scene here that is being described. What we have is this figure with this rather almost animalistic kind of face. The arms are very foreshortened, so there's not much realism to this, but the very center of interest of this sculpture, the choreography, if you will, of the birthing mother here creates a center of interest that is the vagina and I won't go too much further on this, but the center of interest in this sculpture, especially in the way it's displayed in the museum case, and I think this is quite important, is the vaginal area of this figure, which is giving birth to a very tiny little head that is coming out of the figure, the vaginal area of this. And the thing that I find most fascinating in terms of materials here is the feathers on the top of the head, the wood, the rough wood material that the sculpture itself is made from, and the fact that the whole vaginal area is encrusted with wood glitter. So the materials of this are traditional non-artistic materials. They're found materials such as wood, glitter, feathers, these kinds of materials that are characteristic of what we think of as self-taught artists or outsider art. And I want to think about what this says about the representation of natality in the Western tradition and how this may fit in, this particular Madonna, if you will, this particular sacred choreography of birth, how it might fit in to a long conversation in Western art that we may say begins with, say, the early Pietas and continues through the tradition of folk art or outsider art in the American tradition. And I want this to be in the interest of thinking about natality and thinking about an even more capacious built environment of welcome. And I just returned from Florence, where I spent some time in the foundling hospital, the Ospedale degli Innocenti, which is the foundling hospital in Florence that perhaps some of you are familiar with. And I wanted to look there at the foundling wheels or the grates or the windows that were used in all orphanages and foundling homes across Europe. And even today, there are an occasional foundling wheels, and I can talk a little bit more about this, which are places where unwanted children are accepted and cared for. And there's an architecture of foundlings. There's an architecture of this version of natality, of babies, children that are transferred and that are held in some way, much like the figure of the son or the figure of the child that is held on the lap of the mother in the Pietas that I've showed you. I'd like to try to think about how these architectural features, these foundling wheels, hold and therefore create a built literature of welcome for babies and for the kind of new life that Hannah Arendt is talking about welcoming into the world in her theories of natality. So I'm going to stop here with this foundling wheel from Florence. And I would be happy to hear comments or to talk a little bit more about what direction this project might go and how it may fit into all of the work on natality that you collectively are doing. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Rosemarie. That was incredible. I thoroughly enjoyed every minute of that.